Good day. My name is Eliaza. Welcome to EA Lego Academy and welcome to another tutorial series on the Python programming language. So we've learned the basics about programming in Python. When we started the course, we talked about data types, variables and simple data types, and I explained that data types are classes and variables are representations of those classes. So we said data types determine the values that a variable can have, and variables are empty containers. And to be very clear, everything in programming, like when we talk about the general concept of programming, we are dealing with data types and variables. That's what we are dealing with, and we just repeat this concept over and over again. So everything in programming, as we have it, is treated as an object, and everything in programming broken down to their basic constituents, they exist as data types and variables. So now today we are going to be looking at an advanced project. Of course, I will be explaining it. I will be explaining the logic along the way as we build our project. We are going to be looking at a banking system, and I have the outline here. Of course, a banking system in Python. So we are going to be working with a module that we are familiar with, the json module. So the json module allows us to persist our data. So if you are trying to create data that you want to reuse, or maybe, for example, you are trying to create a database management system, you can use json to do that. And you can use Python as a medium for you to be able to create data, create data into the table or into your database, insert data, remove data, and the likes. So now we want to create a very simple structure of a banking system. Now, the banking system will have an option for you to log into your system. Log into your account. Now, if that account does not exist, of course, it's not going to work. So I'll be keeping the project as simple as possible. So I might not create a conditional statement that tells us that if if the initials we're entering, if it's wrong, maybe it's going to print out an error message. But we're going to fine tune the program along the way. But it's going to have these two options. Of course, it's going to be we're going to carry it out in a loop. So if the person doesn't exist, if the person's account is not in the database, you're going to have an error message. You can print that out, and then there will be another option for you to create an account. When you create that account, it will ask you to enter a username, a password, an email, and the amount that you want that person to have. So without further ado, let's start. So now, just like I've told you in our previous tutorials, we're using the PyCharm integrated development environment. We've been using it now for a while. Throughout my tutorial series, if you go back to when we started, when I talked about the installation of PyCharm and the Python interpreter, I said that we will be using PyCharm throughout this course. So go back to your PyCharm IDE, start it, launch it, and navigate to the folder that you have been using to follow along with my tutorial. Now, on the left pane, you will see your folder name. Now, my folder name is variables and simple data types. I will come here, right click, and I will come here to new and Python file. So I will call it banking system or bank management system. Management system. Enter. So now we've started our project. We're going to be taking it step by step. Of course, we're going to be using the blueprint I placed on the screen. This blueprint, this is how our project is going to look like. So now I don't want to waste time. Now the first thing you want to do is to import your JSON module. So JSON, like I said, it allows us to perform data persistence, put data into a file, remove data from a file, update data in a file. It practically does what you would do in a normal RDBMS, a relational database management system. So let's take for instance, if you are working with PostgreSQL, you can carry this out. You can carry out CRUD operations. You can create, you can read, you can update, and you can delete data from a database. So it allows us to do all that, except for the fact that we are not going to be connecting online. We are not going to be connecting our data over the internet, but it allows us to perform similar operations as you will do in a database. Now, the next thing you want to do is to import the OS module. Now, the OS module is just simply stands for operating system. That's all. Operating system. Now, it allows us to access our operating system or use Python to communicate with our operating system. So it practically works for in case you are trying to maybe you are trying to stop your program, use your maybe you are trying to stop a program actually running in a loop, or you are trying to access files on your system. So now we're going to start writing. We're going to create a variable. I will call it database file. Now this file of course has to be a JSON file because this will be the file that will contain the data of each of our users trying to use this bank. So let's assume that this is a bank and the file contains the information of every user of this bank. So I will also give the name of the file database file.json. We are working with a JSON file. We have it. Now the OS module has a class called part. Now that part has a function called exist. Now that exist function returns back a Boolean condition. It allows us to check if a file is in existence on our operating system or not. So I can come here and say if os.part.exists. Now I'm trying to check if that file is in existence on my operating system. Now if that file is in existence, I'm going to create a variable called database and I'm going to use my json.load. Sorry, before that, I'm going to use my with open command. So if os.part exists, you come here and say with open, and we're going to try to read from that file. So I'll say database file. So I'm trying to open it, read from the file, because I'll create a variable that will represent my file fx. You can now create a variable called database. You can give it any name you want, but I'm going to give it database. So json.load fx. What am I doing here? I'm simply trying to check if that file is in existence. And if that file is in existence, I'm trying to load the content from that file and I'm trying to assign the content as a value of this variable. So if you don't understand the JSON module, go back to my previous tutorials on JSON. It's in my tutorial playlist. You can just check it there and you will see I gave a detailed tutorial on the JSON module. So you can go there and check it. But now, if the file is already in existence, what am I trying to do? I'm going to say that same variable, I'm going to assign it an empty dictionary. So rather, if the file is not in existence, I'm going to assign it an empty dictionary. So what this simply does for us is that we are trying to load data from a file if that file is in existence. And if that file is not in existence, you are still going to create that same variable, but this time around, you are going to assign it an empty dictionary as its value. Now, I will create a function that allows me to be saving my code for each update I carry out. Now, this will still perform the with open command. So with open, I'm trying to still read from the database file. This time around, I'm trying to write as fx. Then you can come here and say json.dump Now you want to say database and then fx. So what am I doing here? So now for each update I perform in my code as I'm creating this banking system, for each update I perform, if I've updated this dictionary, so let's say for example the dictionary did not exist, or this value, it's like this file initially did not exist, so of course this conditional statement is not true, it's false. So automatically the code under the condition does not get executed. And from our previous tutorials on if else conditional statements, if you can remember, I said that once the if conditional statement is false, then the else proceeds to get executed. So you will discover that we create a variable and we assign it an empty dictionary as its value. So now, subsequently, if I start adding data to this dictionary, I will need to call this. I will need to call this function for each update I perform in that um, I need to call this function for each update I perform along the way as I keep on performing updates on this dictionary. So that's what I'm trying to do. So let us create our first function. Now our first function, now looking at our diagram system, the diagram system we have login and create account. So now we want to start from creating an account because we are assuming that there's no data. As we can see, there's no data here, obviously, and it's a dictionary. So now, for each of our data, for each user you place into that dictionary, that user by themselves or in itself is going to be a dictionary on its own. So I will create another function and I will call it create account. You can give it any name you want. Now, based on what we have here, we have a username, password, email, amount. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to do that. Pass those parameters we have here. So username, password, email, amount. So user, password, email, and amount. That's what I'm trying to do. So now inside here, since I'm trying to create a dictionary, I can just come here and say data is equal to, I just say user, of course it will be in double quotes or single quotes. You can still remember creating a dictionary. From my previous tutorials, I said dictionary allows us to take key value pairs as an element in a dictionary. So it takes elements rather as key value pairs. So you have elements as key value pairs separated with a colon. So I'm going to create a key called user and I'm going to give it a value of user, which is my parameter in the parenthesis of my function create account. And I will create another key called password, and I will call it password as the value. And I will create another key called email and I'll pass it a value called email. So if you can't remember dictionaries, go back to my previous tutorial. Like I said before, and I will say again, my tutorial is a build up on previously taught principles. I can't be repeating principles I have already explicitly explained. So if you are finding it difficult following this tutorial, it doesn't take you anything. Go back to my previous videos, watch them. If you appreciate them, give them a like. So I will come here and write the next one, amount, then put a colon to separate them as well. So now after I've done this, now remember, we're assuming that we haven't created this file yet. So I want to insert them into this dictionary. And if you can remember from my previous tutorials, I showed you how you can insert into a dictionary. So I can come here, the database, put a square bracket, and equal to data. So now I will tell you what I will put in this square bracket. Now this square bracket will be the name of the user. So you will need to enter the username. Of course, you will have a prompt when we decide to execute this program. But now the user, this user is just the username, but you need like an ID, like an identification to identify that user. So I will give it a number. I will just call it ID. That's what I will pass here as the key. No worry, it will make perfect sense by the time we are done. But what I'm trying to do is that I'm passing a dictionary as a value, and this will be the key. So when I run this program, whichever value I assign to ID will now be the key of this value. So it's going to make this dictionary as the value of that key. So if you can still remember, when we looked at nesting, I explained this explicitly when I talked about the fact that you can have a dictionary inside a dictionary. So this is for when we are creating an account. And of course, you want to call this function inside here so that you can update the file to save. So the reason why I'm doing this is because after, let's assume now that we haven't yet created the file. So if the file has not been created yet, we are now going to come here. We're going to, so if it has not been created yet, this variable here that I created and I assigned it an empty dictionary, I'm going to come here, and whichever value I pass when I execute this program to these values, they will now be, sorry, to these parameters, those values will now be the values of these keys respectively, and the entire dictionary will now be the value of this parameter ID. Of course, I will also give it an argument in the execution of this program. But that argument I gave to ID will now become the key of this dictionary, and automatically it will now be inserted into this dictionary here, and I'm going to update it. So what happens? So coming back here to this function, you can see that here I'm now calling this file, and I'm trying to write that data, this data I just updated, into the file. Hope it makes sense. So for each time you run your code, you are going to keep on you're going to be updating that your JSON file. No, even if it doesn't make sense now, it will make sense along the line. It makes sense later. So now I did add something to this my control flow. Now after I have logged in, I should be able to withdraw and deposit. What I'll come here, I'll create another chain of operation from this point. Create another chain of operation from this point. And you can just come here and create an arrow. I can just come here and say I want to be able to have another option that says deposit, and another option that says withdraw. That's it. I'm keeping it simple. You can of course expand on this program as much as you want, but I'm just keeping it simple so that we can be done with this project. All right, so as you can see, we are doing it off the top of our heads. So let's hope we can finish it properly. Now, the next thing is that I want to perform the operation that I want to perform an operation that will be accessed when I finally press this button. And when I get to this point in my program and I'm trying to perform a deposit, I want to create a function that handles this operation. So I will call it deposit, and of course you will need to know the person who is depositing into that account. You have to make sure that it's someone that is familiar. So of course I will use the ID, has to know the person, the ID and then amount. So now you can print out a message that shows the account balance before deposit. So account balance before deposit. So you can print out the account balance before you deposit amount, and you can perform a deposit. So now, don't forget, you are trying to access the user at you're trying to access a particular user in this dictionary, not this. This represents the data for the user. So you are trying to access one of these. Well, let's assume that we have created like two of these as an example. You will need to access them by their key from this dictionary. So you write here, say database in a square bracket. Now the first square bracket would represent the key name, obviously. which is going to be the ID to represent the ID obviously. So I'll write ID. After that, you want to now target the amount. So the amount I'm trying to update here. No worry, it will make perfect sense to you, because if you can remember, even if it's not making perfect sense to you, go back to my previous tutorials when I talked about nesting, so you would understand this exact concept I'm doing here. So I'm trying to increase the amount that was already there. Let's assume that I've already created that person's details. I'm trying to increase it by a particular amount. Come here and say plus amount. So, and of course, we already know that when you are accessing a value in a dictionary, you use the key to access the value of that key. You can come here and print out another sentence. So what I will do to save myself the time, I'll just come here, copy it, and I'll paste my code here, Control V. And I'll just change it to account balance after deposit. After I must have performed a deposit. Yeah. Then we want to perform a withdrawal. Of course, you need to know the person you are withdrawing from, whose account you are withdrawing from, and the amount you are trying to withdraw. Now you can also print out balance, account balance before withdrawal. You can copy this, save yourself the stress. I like saving myself stress when it comes to code. So account balance before withdrawal. Withdrawal. Now you want to create a conditional statement so that you do not withdraw an amount that is more than the balance. You can come here and say if the amount you are trying to withdraw is greater than what is inside that person's account. You say database, of course you want to know the person you are withdrawing from and his amount. So if the amount you are withdrawing is greater than what is inside that person's account, then you want to print out insufficient funds. Insufficient funds. Insufficient funds. Now the OS module. The OS, of course, okay, we don't want to exit the program. We want to still be in the program. So, we need to